Hi, it's Katrina. Aerion AS2. A joint endeavor between Boeing and the Texas-based startup Aerion seeks to develop the AS2, a 12-passenger supersonic business jet that will enable corporate bigwigs to cut their transatlantic crossing time by 3 hours. Boeing recently entered the picture as the replacement for Lockheed Martin, the company Aerion was previously partnered with. The new investor plans to accelerate the AS2's development by generously funding the project through engineering, manufacturing, and flight test resources. The AS2 is the brainchild of Aerion's founder, Texas billionaire Robert Bass. He hopes to reintroduce supersonic civilian flight, which was discontinued in 2003. The Concorde, which flew at more than twice the speed of sound, or Mach 2, was the only supersonic jet to ever fly commercially. Its operators were required to comply with strict noise restrictions due to the aircraft's supersonic booms as it broke through the noise barrier once and then again. For this reason, the Concorde's flight routes were more or less limited to ocean crossings. The exorbitant cost of operating the impressive jet ultimately proved to be more than it was worth. General Electric has completed an initial engine design for the AS2 that should enable the jet to fly at supersonic speeds while adhering to strict sound and emissions guidelines. But to avoid suffering the same fate as the Concorde, or even worse, one of the numerous failed supersonic jet programs of recent decades, the AS2 will have to be economically sustainable. Assuming everything goes according to plan, the AS2 will fly at Mach 1.4, or approximately 1,000 miles per hour, 70% faster than today's speediest business jets. Its maiden flight is scheduled for 2023. The Flying V. Dutch national airline KLM is collaborating with Delft University of Technology to design the prototype for a fuel-efficient, long-distance commercial aircraft. Justice Benad, a former student at the Technical University of Berlin, thought up the idea for the Flying V. The futuristic V-shaped plane will use 20% less fuel than today's most advanced airplane, the Airbus A350, despite having the same wingspan and 314 passenger capacity. This is because it will be smaller, lighter, and more aerodynamically efficient, creating less drag. Its fuel tank, passenger cabin, and cargo hold will be integrated directly into the wing design. The current design implements the most fuel-efficient turbofans in existence, according to KLM, and is adaptable to future technological innovations, such as electronic turbofans. The ultimate goal is to achieve an emission-free flight, according to Professor Henry Verrey of Delft University. If you're hoping to take a ride on this airplane, plan to wait a while. The Flying V is projected to enter service between 2040 and 2050. Spike S512. The Spike Aerospace S512 supersonic business jet is slated to be the world's first supersonic private jet, and it promises big things. At a cruising speed of Mach 1.6, or around 1,100 miles per hour, the 12 to 18 passenger aircraft will transport riders from New York to London in under 4 hours. It will also offer non-stop flights between London and Hong Kong, as well as New York City and Dubai, at a 40% time savings compared to other modern jets, or about 450 miles per hour faster. Spike's Boston-based crew is composed of former Airbus, Bombardier, and Gulfstream engineers, as well as entrepreneurs and investors willing to fund the ambitious vision. One major thing they haven't figured out is how to quiet the loud boom that has caused the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, to ban supersonic overland flights. It's something Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and NASA are all trying to remedy, yet the Spike S512 promises a very low sonic boom, courtesy of patent-pending technology. At a hefty price tag of at least $100 million, let's hope the S512 delivers on this and all of its other guarantees. Spike originally promised for the S512 to hit the skies at the end of 2018, but it hasn't happened yet. You can, however, reserve a jet on their website, indicating that the company fully plans to see its project to fruition. We gotta get on that! Make our reservations now! Airship cruise liner. In 2017, a concept image of a flying cruise ship appeared on Reddit, causing many to wonder, what if? The picture shows a blimp-like aircraft with a glass roof and a pool underneath, surrounded by guests. Internet users became enamored with the idea and gave the space-age plane nicknames like the Sky-tanic and Fly-tanic. Of course, there were some common sense questions regarding this seemingly unrealistic vehicle, including what would happen if it hit turbulence. One user suggested that the swimming pool would simply become a wave pool, a fun idea to some and undoubtedly a terrifying prospect for others. But the idea of a flying cruise ship may not be as crazy as it sounds. One company has entertained the possibility of an airship that becomes airborne like a helium balloon, called the Aerospace. The prototype would be the world's largest aircraft and possibly the world's largest cruise ship, defeating Royal Caribbean's Symphony of the Seas, which has a 6,780 passenger capacity. What do you think of these floating airships with pools? Are they a possibility? Would you fly in one? Let me know in the comments below. The Strato launch. Microsoft co-founder and billionaire Paul Allen founded Stratolaunch Systems Corporation, which built the world's largest all-composite aircraft, the Stratolaunch. The twin fuselage plane has a 385-foot wingspan, which is longer than a football field, and 6 jet engines. According to its website, the Stratolaunch was designed as a mobile launch platform for airline-style access to space that is convenient, affordable, and routine. It has a reinforced center wing with a carrying capacity of 500,000 pounds, enabling it to carry multiple launch vehicles. The Stratolaunch flew for the first time last April. It spent 2.5 hours over the Mojave Desert, reaching a maximum speed of 189 miles per hour and altitudes of up to 17,000 feet. Despite this successful first flight, Stratolaunch Systems Corporation changed ownership from its holding company, Vulcan Inc., to an unknown buyer several months later. The company hit the market in June at a $400 million asking price. And all anyone seems to know is that an anonymous buyer grabbed it up. Rumors swirled about Virgin Group founder Richard Branson being interested, but he reportedly pitched an offer of just $1, meaning he's probably not the new owner of Stratolaunch. Maverick. If you ask Airbus, the future of passenger aircraft lies in the company's model aircraft for validation and experimentation of robust, innovative controls, or Maverick project. The European aircraft manufacturer revealed a model of the ultra-modern jet it hopes to eventually create in February at the Singapore Air Show 2020. The model is based on a blended wing design that is typically used for military aircraft, with the fuselage being incorporated into the wing. Put simply, it looks like a single giant wing. Its engines won't be under the wing like they are on many aircrafts, but will instead be attached to vertical stabilizers at the plane's rear. The blended wing will decrease resistance and improve fuel efficiency by around 20%, according to Airbus. It will also create a wide rather than long interior, meaning the inside of the plane will look much different than what modern passengers are used to. Unlike the tubular fuselages of today's commercial planes, designers will have a large, unusually shaped space to work with. This means that business class might not be at the front, where we're used to seeing it, and the seats may not even be in conventional rows. Maybe they'll be more comfortable. Airbus quietly began the Maverick project in 2017, and in 2019 began running tests on a 10.5-foot wide remote-controlled model, the world's first air taxi. In our ever-advancing world, the idea of urban transportation through flight isn't entirely unrealistic, and it may not be too far into the future. Daniel Weigand is the founder of Lilium, a secret startup devoted to creating an all-electric plane for transporting passengers over cities. He believes that within 5 years, it will be possible to fly from Manhattan to John F. Kennedy Airport in Queens for just $70. If you've ever gotten stuck in traffic on your way to the airport in a New York City yellow cab, then you know this is a ridiculously reasonable fare, especially for a 10-minute trip. In fact, it almost sounds too good to be true. Weigand has built a prototype of his dream aircraft, which he keeps in an airplane hangar outside Munich. Lilium is just one of 20 or so companies that are invested in the aerial taxi market. Big companies like Toyota, Porsche, and Uber, and big investors like Google co-founder Larry Page are eagerly funding and designing what they believe is the best version of tomorrow's method of getting from point A to point B. Morgan Stanley estimates that by 2040, the industry will top $850 billion. Whether the industry will take off as soon as some people hope is a matter of speculation. The FAA and other regulators will have to develop guidelines revolving around electronic flight safety, and building a reasonably priced, durable jet remains a yet unsolved engineering feat. Boom Overture. In late 2016, billionaire and Virgin Group founder Sir Richard Branson unveiled the XB-1, a half-sized prototype for a supersonic 40-passenger jet that will travel between New York City and London in just 3 hours and 15 minutes. Branson has long been passionate about the prospect of supersonic passenger flight. In 2003, he fought to keep the Concorde in the air and even entertained the idea of buying one, but these endeavors failed. Virgin Galactic and the Denver-based startup Boom Supersonic are working together to turn this vision into a reality in the form of a commercial aircraft known as Overture. It's meant to be the fastest ever passenger plane, offering affordable flights between the two major cities in less than half the time it takes with conventional aircraft. It will fly 10% faster than the Concorde at Mach 2.2, or 1,451 miles per hour. Nicknamed the Baby Boom, the XB-1 prototype was originally slated to fly for the first time in 2019, but the date has been pushed back to sometime this year. Perhaps the biggest factor working in Virgin and Boom's favor and against their competitors is that the plane is being built using already existing technology. The 3-engine Overture's sonic boom is projected to be 30 times quieter than that of the Concorde, and the jet should be able to fly farther and more economically. Boom Supersonic is so confident in this project, they're planning sales ahead of time, with the current price for a plane ticket from London to New York set at $3,100. Would you buy a ticket this early and for this price? Let me know in the comments below. Progress Eagle. In 2015, designer and aviation enthusiast Oscar Vinyls released his conceptual design for the AWWA QG Progress Eagle, a zero-emission, tri-level aircraft that would hold as many as 800 passengers. The plane will be powered by 6 hydrogen engines. The eco-friendly contraption's rear engine would also function as a wind turbine, and its roof and wings would contain solar panels. As if the far-flung concept couldn't get any more challenging and possibly ridiculous, Vinyls hopes for the plane to hit the skies around 2030. The man admitted that technology isn't ready to bring his vision to life, proving he's at least somewhat sane, but he believes we're about 40% there. To give you an idea, the largest commercial jet currently in service is the Airbus A380, a double-decker that holds over 500 passengers. While it's more fuel efficient per passenger than an average car, the long-haul plane has a fuel capacity of nearly 82,000 gallons, indicating that flight technology is nowhere near ready for a zero-emission 800-passenger jet, let alone within the next decade. However, everything started with a dream, just maybe the timeline needs to be changed. Link and Fly. In 2018, the Paris-based global engineering and research and development firm ACA Group presented a prototype of its Link and Fly aircraft at the Paris Air Show. The Link and Fly concept surpasses the idea of an aerial taxi and instead takes air travel to the next level. It's a subway in the sky. Boarding a flight would start at someone's local train station, where they would board a tube-shaped train and head to the airport. Once there, the cylindrical pod would travel to the runway and be affixed with a cockpit and wings. Then it would take to the skies. After arriving in the destination city, it would convert back into a train and deliver all of the passengers to convenient locations. ACA CEO Maurice Ricci believes that once driverless cars become commonplace, airplanes will naturally come next, according to a Bloomberg interview that took place at the air show. The 162-seat aircraft that would be used for this purpose would have a cruising speed of 598 miles per hour and a maximum cruising altitude of 39,800 feet. Creating such a vehicle would not be easy or cheap. Not only would it have to be multifunctional as both a train and an aircraft, but airport infrastructure would have to be upgraded so the trains could roll right onto the runway, as writer Jay Bennett pointed out in a 2018 Popular Mechanics article. While this may not be realistic at the moment or anytime in the near future, it's an interesting possibility to consider for, well, someday. Colliding galaxies. Thanks to gravity, the Milky Way galaxy will someday either collide with or at least sideswipe its neighbor Andromeda. The galactic merger, projected to occur around 4 billion years from now, will cause stars to move along new trajectories. Thankfully, they're unlikely to smash into each other due to the vast distance between them, and our solar system will probably remain unharmed by the event, in case you were worried. According to a 2018 study, Andromeda devoured M32P, a large sibling galaxy of the Milky Way roughly 2 billion years ago. An extremely compact satellite galaxy of our spiral-shaped neighbor, called M32, is thought to be the long-dead galaxy's corpse. Yikes! How's that for a visual? Researchers assert that the impending Andromeda-Milky Way collision will be much bigger, but they admittedly have a lot to learn about galactic mergers. An ongoing collision, photographed by the Hubble telescope, is helping them better understand the phenomenon. German astronomer William Herschel discovered the merger, called NGC 6052, in 1784. It's happening 230 million light-years away in the Hercules constellation. Herschel classified NGC 6052 as an irregularly shaped galaxy, but scientists later realized that it's two galaxies becoming one, hence its chaotic shape. The merging process is gradual, but eventually a single, stable galaxy will form, and the final product may not resemble either of the two original components. Reindeer cyclone. While I know you've heard of hurricanes and cyclones where massive winds rotate round and round, did you know that there are reindeer cyclones too? This is real, and they used to be a real threat to Viking hunters in the past. This phenomenon is a defensive strategy that reindeer use to confuse predators, making it difficult for the perceived threat, human or otherwise, to effectively target a single animal. Both wild and captive reindeer practice this behavior. A scene in the 2019 PBS documentary Wild Way of the Vikings shows a massive herd of reindeer encircling a confused hunter, along with aerial footage of the swirling mass called a reindeer cyclone and the bewildered Viking in the eye of the storm. How are you supposed to get out of that without getting trampled? The show is about Vikings and what nature was like around the year 1000. Obviously, this is an actor playing a Viking, but the camera captures the real reindeer running in circles, creating this cyclone or storm. Vikings hunted many things and were very resourceful, making whatever use they could of their surroundings, but reindeer were especially important to the seafaring warriors who used every part of the animal, including their meat, bones, hides, antlers, you name it. Cannibalistic bunker ants. In 2013, Polish scientists discovered a colony of up to 1 million wood ants that had been trapped in an abandoned nuclear bunker for years, with no food source other than their dead nestmates. There were also no signs of reproduction taking place, including no queens, larvae, or ant cocoons. Yet when the researchers returned to the site 2 years later, the population, which consisted only of worker ants, had somehow grown. A study published later that year concluded that the ants fell into the bunker from the nesting colony above through a ventilation pipe and could not exit the same way they got in because they were unable to walk across the ceiling to reach the pipe. Worker ants don't usually start a separate colony, but all things considered, the trapped ants had no choice but to carry on with their lives. In hopes of giving them an escape route, the research team positioned a wooden beam between the floor and the pipe entrance. They returned again in 2017 and found that their vertical boardwalk had worked. The colony had almost completely vanished from the bunker, leaving behind piles of their dead mates. Upon taking a closer look, the scientists noticed that the corpses were riddled with bites and holes, confirming their hypothesis that the ants had survived by eating the remains of deceased colony members. While cannibalism is not unheard of among ants, it is also not a regular practice. The displaced colony's ability to thrive in a bunker with no heat, light, or typical food sources demonstrates the resilience that these insects are known for. Grasshopper blizzard. Last July, tens of thousands of grasshoppers invaded Las Vegas for several days, in a swarm so dense it could be seen on weather radar. They crowded the strip and were stacking up at the entrances to casinos. These were migrating pallid-winged grasshoppers, and the invasion came after a particularly wet winter and spring in Nevada, which saw twice as much rainfall as usual. So the grasshoppers got excited and decided to migrate in larger numbers. Increased serotonin secretions among the dense population of well-fed grasshoppers triggered them to collectively take flight. While migrating grasshoppers usually fly low enough to avoid radar detection, they sometimes migrate northward at altitudes of up to 1,000 feet. Weather radar picked up the swarm that stormed Las Vegas, which looked like storm clouds at first glance. Swarming events like this are unusual, but not unheard of. In 1988, masses of the insects laid siege to Arizona, covering the street in a 2-inch thick layer. We have clear records from the 60s of it happening, and I've seen it at least 4 or 5 times in my 30-plus years, said Jeff Knight, state entomologist with the Nevada Department of Agriculture. To anyone who had never experienced one, the seemingly apocalyptic grasshopper blizzard came as a shock, as stunned onlookers posted photos and videos of the swarm blanketing the city. But these insects are harmless to humans. They don't carry any diseases, Knight stated. They don't bite. They're not even one of the species that we consider a problem. They probably won't cause much damage in a yard. It would be pointless to try controlling the grasshopper population with pesticides during a swarming event of this magnitude anyway, according to Knight. Thankfully, their visits tend to only last several weeks at most. Earth's most inaccessible point. There is a place on our planet that sits in closer proximity to astronauts in space than to any humans on Earth. Point Nemo is the world's most remote location. In other words, the furthest point from land, giving a literal meaning to the term the middle of nowhere. Officially called the Oceanic Pole of Inaccessibility, it's surrounded by over 1,000 miles of ocean in all directions. It's located within a triangle of the three nearest land masses: Ducie Island of the Pitcairn Archipelago to the north, Moto Nui of the Easter Island chain to the northeast, and Maher Island off the coast of Antarctica to the south. Now that's remote. Point Nemo is so far away from civilization it was discovered using a computer. Survey engineer Hervoge Lucatella located in 1992. The closest people to Point Nemo at any given time are usually the astronauts at the International Space Station, which hovers 258 miles above Earth. It's likely that no humans have ever passed through it. Point Nemo is also described as the least biologically active region of the ocean. It's located within a massive rotating current called the South Pacific Gyre, which blocks nutrient-rich waters from entering, thus making it impossible for life forms beyond bacteria and small crabs to thrive there. Earliest known walking animal. Around 550 million years ago, during the Ediacaran period, a segmented millipede-like worm called Ylingia speciformis died along the muddy ocean floor. Its remains and trail became fossilized, and they are the earliest known evidence of an animal walking along the Earth's surface. Discovered in China's Yangtze Gorges in the Yiling district, along with 34 other fossils belonging to the same species, Ylingia was made up of about 50 symmetrical segments and measured up to 4 inches long and 1 inch wide. It left long trails of up to 23 inches. Long trails for it, I mean. Researchers believe it may have been related to segmented worms called annelids or tiny vertebrates called arthropods. The creature shows bilateral symmetry, meaning its left and right sides were identical. Bilateral symmetry is a trait most likely shared by all animals, including humans, which evolved to make ground movement possible, probably sometime during the period in which Ylingia lived. Bilateral animals, and particularly humans, are movers and shakers on Earth, study co-author Shuhai Chao of the Virginia Tech College of Science said in a statement. Their ability to shape the face of the planet is ultimately tied to the origin of animal mobility. We can now thank this worm for that, I guess. Mexico's hidden beach. Located at the mouth of Banderas Bay among the Marietta Islands, roughly 22 nautical miles west of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, is an island with a gaping hole in its surface containing a stunning beach called Playa del Amor, more commonly known as the Hidden Beach. Atlas Obscura describes it as like something out of a fantasy novel, a wide sandy cavern with the blue waters of the Pacific rushing in. The beach itself, along with several other caves and rock formations on the island, was created by a test bomb. Because the Marietta Islands are uninhabited, the Mexican government used them for weapons and artillery testing beginning in the early 1900s. The islands were redesignated as a national park in 2005, and while the decades of man-made damage done to them is still evident, nature has taken over again. Concealed from the outside world, the beach is only accessible through a 79-foot tunnel that connects it to the Pacific Ocean, through which visitors can access Playa del Amor by swimming or kayaking. That sounds awesome! Bismuth. Bismuth, element 83 on the periodic table, is a crystalline white metal with various uses, including in cosmetics, alloys, fire extinguishers, and ammunition, and as the main ingredient in Pepto-Bismol. This brittle material is a post-transition metal, meaning it shares some characteristics with transition metals but is softer, conducts more poorly, has unusually low thermal and electric conductivity, and has a lower melting point. Because its outer edges develop more quickly than the inner material, it forms a unique stair-step pattern, giving it the appearance of interlocking rainbow squares. Bismuth is unique for its less than straightforward forms. It occurs in at least 8 different solid phases and undergoes various phase transitions under increasing temperature and pressure conditions. In 2017, scientists discovered that bismuth retains a structural memory of its liquid state under certain conditions. This causes the metal's magnetic properties to change from diamagnetic, or repelling when solid, to ferromagnetic, or being attracted to a magnetic field in liquid form. In a study, researchers from the Carnegie Institution for Science heated bismuth to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit and subjected it to pressures between 14,000 and 24,000 times greater than normal atmospheric pressure, bringing it to a liquid state. Then they slowly cooled it back into a solid and observed that the bismuth remembered the ferromagnetic properties of its liquid state. The high-pressure liquid becomes more structurally disordered when the heat is applied, taking on what we call a deep liquid state, certain structural characteristics of which remain even when the bismuth is cooled back to a solid, explained researcher Guoyan Shen. This is the first time such an effect has been seen in an elemental metal. Scientists still have a lot to learn, including how solid bismuth can act as a ferromagnet and how the metal stores its structural memory. A microorganism that can survive in space. Tardigrades, also called moss piglets and water bears, are aquatic 8-legged creatures that reach a maximum length of 1 millimeter. There are over 1,000 species, and most live on moss or at the bottoms of lakes where they feed on bacteria and plants. Some tardigrades can endure some really extreme conditions. Scientists have found them living in environments like hot springs and underneath Himalayan ice. Even more impressively, they can tolerate temperatures as low as minus 328 degrees Fahrenheit and over 300 degrees Fahrenheit. They can also withstand pressures in excess of 6,000 times that of the atmosphere, as well as thousands of times more radiation than what constitutes a fatal dose for a human. European researchers proved in 2007 that tardigrades can even survive in space when they expose dehydrated specimens to such conditions for 10 days. Upon being rehydrated, a shocking 68% of them, which were protected from the radiation, survived, while several of the unprotected specimens also survived and reproduced successfully. It's most likely the toughest animal ever. Scientists believe the tardigrades are resilient because they respond to environmental stressors by entering a near-death-like dehydrated state, curling up into a ball called a ton, and reducing its metabolic activity to almost nothing. This is possible thanks to a special protective sugar called Trehalose, which suspends the creature's cells. A tardigrade can survive for decades as a ton, that's TUN, returning to life once it hits the water. They've even been brought back to life from a 100-year-old museum sample of tree moss, although their chances of survival reduce the longer they remain in a dehydrated state. Pando, or the trembling giant, is a grove of 47,000 quaking aspen trees in Utah, all stemming from a single root system, thus constituting a single organism. The trees, which are genetically identical and reproduce asexually through a shared single root system, have been growing for at least 80,000 years. Pando spans 107 acres and weighs 6,615 tons. But a 2018 study found that its future is in jeopardy. Aerial images show that in the last 3 to 4 decades, gaps began appearing between the trees, whose crowns were once touching. This means that as trees die, new ones are failing to replace them. There are no young or middle-aged trees at all, according to lead study author and ecologist Paul Rogers of Utah State University, who said that the grove consists almost entirely of very elderly senior citizens. Mule deer and cattle are eating the saplings at an alarming rate, courtesy of a U.S. Forest Service policy that allows them to graze there for 2 weeks annually. The area also lacks apex predators, which once kept the mule deer population in check. Moreover, mule deer seem to be making their way over the protective fencing surrounding the grove. But the forest can be saved using common sense measures, like better fencing, if the people with the authority to implement these changes decide to do so. Humpback whale. Early last year, local fishermen got a surprise when they discovered something pretty strange in the middle of the jungle. A 26-foot baby humpback whale carcass. It was found on the Brazilian island of Maranhão, which is situated near the mouth of the Amazon River. The nonprofit research group Bicho de Agua explained that the whale probably became lost at sea and died of starvation or some other unknown cause, which makes sense. But how did it end up in the middle of the jungle? During this season, the tide normally rises twice a day to almost 4 meters and floods the mangrove forest, oceanographer Maura Sousa explained. The tides washed the whale's body ashore at Arana Beach in the city of Sore and then carried it into the mangrove forest roughly 50 feet from shore. It likely passed away 4 to 5 days before it ended up there. Sousa said that while humpback whales are common in the South Atlantic, this one appeared at an unusual time of year, and it may have even been a North Atlantic whale. Researchers hope that a necropsy and DNA test will yield more information about where the whale came from and how it died. Sigiriya. Dubbed the eighth wonder of the world by locals, Sigiriya is an ancient 590-foot-tall palace and fortress complex located on a rocky plateau in the heart of Sri Lanka. Formed from the magma of an extinct volcano, the structure towers some 656 feet over the surrounding jungle. Sigiriya and its nearby territories were inhabited for centuries by ancient civilizations, royalty, and others. From the 3rd century BC, the site served as a monastery. Then, in the late 5th century, a royal residence for King Kasyapa was constructed there. The property once again became a Buddhist monastery after King Kasyapa's death, until it was permanently abandoned in the 14th century. The rock formation was built in the shape of a lion. While the upper parts were destroyed, the lion's feet remain intact. Sigiriya's western walls are covered in 18 frescoes depicting various women. The portraits are likely of priestesses as well as King Kasyapa's concubines and wives, and were created during his reign. There is also a mirror wall at Sigiriya featuring poems and inscriptions left by past visitors, dating back to the 8th century. During the palace's heyday, the mirror wall was kept polished so the king could see his reflection in it. Today, Sigiriya is one of Sri Lanka's most popular and historically significant tourist destinations. A devoted soldier. When World War II ended in 1945 with the Japanese surrender to the Allied forces, one soldier simply did not believe it was over. Hiroo Onoda, a Japanese intelligence soldier from Wakayama Prefecture, remained in the Philippine jungle for over 30 years, relying on his guerrilla warfare skills to stay hidden and avoid capture. Authorities said that they had flown over the area many times, dropping packages and letters, saying that the war was over, but Onoda refused to accept the news. Onoda was initially joined by 3 comrades, one of whom left the jungle and returned to Japan in 1950. The same year, another of Onoda's comrades was killed. His 3rd comrade survived until 1972. In 1974, Onoda's brother and former commanding officer traveled to the island of Lubang, where the holdouts' hideout was located, and finally convinced him that the war had ended. Onoda later explained that he believed Tokyo's pro-US government was scheming against him in their previous attempts to persuade him off the island. He formally surrendered to Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos in his Imperial Army uniform, cap, and sword, which were all still in good condition. Marcos pardoned Onoda for killing as many as 30 people he mistakenly took for enemy soldiers throughout the years. Onoda moved to Brazil and became a farmer in 1975 and returned to Japan a decade later, where he created nature camps for children. He passed away in 2014 at the age of 91. The Lost White City. In 2015, archaeologists explored the ruins of an ancient lost city in the Mosquitia rainforest in Honduras. For centuries, indigenous locals spoke of a legendary white city, also known as the City of the Monkey God. But there was no physical evidence of the once thriving metropolis. Everyone thought it was perhaps a legendary city until 2012, when an overhead aerial survey detected the ruins. The mysterious culture that inhabited the White City thrived a millennium ago, before unexplainably vanishing. During their visit, the team of experts mapped the site's plazas and earthen pyramids, mounds, and other structures. They also discovered a collection of stone sculptures that were last handled 1,000 years ago, when the city was abandoned. The cache may have been an offering, according to Mesoamerican archaeologist Christopher Fisher, who participated in the expedition. He also said that it's incredibly rare to find artifacts like these in such an undisturbed, pristine state. Very little is known about the people who lived in the White City, including what they called themselves, and La Mosquitia region that the city is located within is one of the world's least scientifically explored areas. The discoveries in recent years and further exploration will hopefully help researchers get one step closer to uncovering the secrets of the Eden-like paradise so frequently mentioned in local folklore. A wartime hideout. In 2015, archaeologists from the University of Buenos Aires announced the discovery of what they believe to be a German World War II-era hideout nestled in the thick vegetation of Argentina's Teyucuaré National Park in the northeastern province of Misiones. Located close to the border with Paraguay, this site has long been associated with local legends of secretive German occupation. Evidence of this was finally unearthed thanks to the archaeological team, who found fragments of a German-made plate at the site, along with 5 German coins minted between 38 and 41. The alleged bunker consists of a normal house with enough room for 6 to 8 families and is surrounded by 10-foot thick walls and a hilltop watchtower. It's in an extremely remote location that would have been especially difficult to access back in the 1940s and even harder to survive in. After the war ended and until 1955, Germans were welcomed into Argentina. Their post-war presence in the country numbered at least 5,000, according to records in Chile and Brazil that were uncovered in 2012. But most of them lived in cities and on ranches rather than in secret bunkers, according to Vice, suggesting that the clandestine refuge was there before Germans began migrating en masse to South America. Skeptics suggest that this simply was not the case and that the structure may have been a failed homestead or a refuge belonging to some other group of people, and that locals advertise it as a German site to increase tourism profits. What do you think? Is the bunker the real deal, or was someone trying to make a quick buck? Let me know in the comments below, but first, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. An airplane hotel. Located in Costa Rica's Manuel Antonio National Park is a 1965 Boeing 727 that, at first glance, you may assume crashed into the jungle and was simply left there, but it's actually a refurbished aircraft that was converted into a hotel. Before it became a 2-bedroom home away from home with a terrace and stunning views, the plane was salvaged from the San Jose International Airport in Alajuela, Costa Rica. Getting the 727 to the middle of the jungle was no easy task. It took 5 truckloads, and once the frame reached its destination, it was reassembled atop a 50-foot pedestal, where it sits high enough for guests to enjoy ocean and jungle views. The vintage hotel is completely modern. It's fully air-conditioned with 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchenette and dining area, a spiral staircase leading to the entrance, surrounding gardens, and a hardwood deck where the right wing once was. Guests sometimes even spot animals like sloths, toucans, and monkeys while kicking back on the terrace. Bucket list item? You bet. A man-made rainforest. Sometimes it's not just what you find inside the jungle that surprises you, it's the jungle itself. One of Charles Darwin's least known accomplishments exists in the form of a man-made rainforest on Ascension, a remote island in the South Atlantic. Located just south of the equator, 1,000 miles from the African coast and 1,400 miles from the South American coast, the tiny 33-square-mile tropical island was once nothing more than a barren volcanic outcrop. Charles Darwin arrived at Ascension in 1836, and after referring to the island as hideous, set forth a plan to create a lush green artificial ecosystem. But Ascension was arid and lacked a freshwater source, and the rain it received evaporated almost entirely, posing obvious obstacles to growing a forest. Nevertheless, at Darwin's urging, a botanist and explorer named Joseph Hooker convinced the Royal Navy to go along with the idea. Starting in 1850, tree and plant shipments from botanical gardens in Europe, South Africa, and Argentina began arriving on the island. They were planted on Green Mountain, which juts over 2,000 feet into the sky. Things worked out splendidly. The trees captured and absorbed rain, causing less moisture to evaporate. As a result, the soil became richer. A diverse assortment of species thrived by the late 1870s, including Norfolk Island pines, banana trees, bamboo, and eucalyptus. The formation of a rainforest on Ascension is especially impressive because it sprang up in as little as 150 years, when this highly complex type of environment usually takes much longer to form. Scientists are looking to the rainforest on Green Mountain for potential clues about how vegetation could someday grow on Mars. The Amazon rings. A shocking 2014 study revealed that several ditches throughout the Bolivian and Brazilian Amazon were there before the rainforest itself. The square, straight, and ring-like formations are human-made, but their purpose and who built them remain a mystery. Their presence also begs the question of how prehistoric people changed the Amazonian landscape before Europeans arrived. Researchers believe the ditches were possibly ceremonial or religious in nature, or that they may have had practical uses, such as defense or drainage. The findings challenge the previously held theory that indigenous people barely altered the landscapes they lived in before moving into another area. In the 1980s, deforestation began revealing, quite literally, the flaws in this type of thinking. The ditches, which are up to 16 feet deep and nearly just as wide, have brought to light a new controversy between experts, whether they were slash-and-burn operations that were abandoned and became overgrown, or if the pre-Columbian people who created the ditches did little else to alter the environment. Sediment samples from northeastern Bolivia revealed that until a few thousand years ago, parts of the Amazon more closely resembled the African savanna than its current jungle habitat. Drought-resistant species, including evergreens and pollen, increasingly appeared in the samples starting around 2,000 years ago. Charcoal levels simultaneously decreased, making the environment less prone to wildfires. Based on these findings, it appears that the area's early inhabitants dug these mysterious ditches before the forest grew around them. A boiling river. Geophysicist Andrés Russo first heard of a boiling Amazonian river called Chaney Timpishka as a child from his grandfather. To find out if the fabled river really exists, he traveled deep into the Peruvian jungle to investigate and found what he was looking for. Russo told National Geographic that the 5.5-mile river, which reaches 16 feet deep in some places, starts off as a cold stream. The lower 3.8 miles constitute the hot portion, with temperatures ranging between 80.6 degrees to 201.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of that flow, particularly during the dry season, is hot enough to kill you, Russo said. Small mammals, reptiles, or amphibians regularly fall in and are boiled alive. The boiling river is a non-volcanic geothermal feature. In other words, a stream of extremely hot water that flows at very fast rates from deep within the earth. This discovery came as good news to Russo, who suspected that the boiling river may have resulted from a nearby oil field accident rupturing a local geothermal system. Locals who have long known about the boiling river consider it a sacred place and believe its waters have healing powers. A shaman from the nearby town of Mayantuyacu guards the river and grants permission to those seeking to explore it. All things considered, it's good that someone keeps an eye on the river. After all, if someone fell in, they'd instantly be covered in third-degree burns, and even the mud is too hot to walk on in some spots. A fairy tale mountain. At first glance, you'd probably never guess that the Montaña Mágica Lodge, a hotel located in Chile's Huilo Natural Reserve in the southern Andes, is man-made. The structure, which appears to be a volcano covered in overgrowth and with waterfalls flowing down the sides, blends in perfectly with the surrounding Patagonian jungle. Built from locally sourced stone and wood, the hotel contains homey suites named after different bird species and is surrounded by 232 square miles of forest. Getting to the hotel is no easy task, requiring at least a 2-hour flight from the nearest airfield, but by all appearances, it seems worthwhile. To reach the hotel's entrance, visitors are required to cross a charming monkey bridge. Inside the hotel, there is a brewery and pizzeria. There is also a nearby spa, along with South America's longest zip line, enabling guests to soar 1,500 feet above the ground. While exploring outdoors, you're likely to catch a glimpse of some of the jungle's permanent residents, including deer and wild boar. Pink see-through Fantasia. This thing looks completely surreal. The pink see-through Fantasia kind of looks like a jellyfish, but it is actually a free-swimming sea cucumber. It lives about 1.5 miles beneath the surface in the Celebes Sea, a remote part of the western Pacific to the east of Borneo. All its insides, including its mouth, intestines, and anus, are visible from the outside through its transparent pink exterior. Hence its name. Perfect name, right? Really descriptive. As if it weren't already strange enough, the pink see-through Fantasia is bioluminescent and emits light to alarm potential predators when it perceives danger. Its swimming parts consist of a finger-like webbing underneath its body. It's got all kinds of stuff going on. Scientists have a lot to learn about this strange specimen, which was discovered in 2007. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution biologist Larry Madden and his team discovered it during an expedition sponsored by NOAA to explore biodiversity in the region. They did a good job. Yeti crab. Officially named the Kiwa hirsuta, the Yeti crab is a hairy crustacean that scientists first discovered in 2005. This hairy crab definitely reminds me of the Yeti. It has long, furry arms and no eyes, but it was actually named after the mythological goddess Kiwa, after the mythological Polynesian goddess of shellfish. It was first found on a hydrothermal vent during a research expedition on the Easter Island microplate, about 5,000 feet below the water's surface. In the more than 30 years of hydrothermal vent exploration that had already taken place, nobody had ever seen such a creature. Scientists have classified it not only as a new species, but as belonging to an entirely new family. It's related to crabs, lobsters, and shrimp, but its distinct physical features, such as a lack of eyes and hair-like setae, as well as its genetic code preclude it from being classified into the same family as any of those animals. Despite having never been seen before 2005, the Yeti crab seems to be common in the specific area it was discovered in, although its geographic distribution is probably limited, as most explored hydrothermal vent sites are located at middle latitudes. Scientists saw it eating mussels, but other than that, we don't really know much else about it. Another species was discovered in Antarctica in 2010, called the hairy-chested Yeti crab. It's the third species to be discovered, and they live together in large groups in extremely harsh environments. Hydrothermal vents are about as hot as it gets. Squidworm. Teothydodrilus seme, known more commonly as the squidworm, was discovered in 2007 in the Coral Triangle area between Indonesia and the Philippines, the same region east of Borneo where the pink see-through Fantasia was first found. It was found at a depth of 1.8 miles using a remotely operated vehicle. The squidworm gets its name from the 10 tentacle-like appendages on its head, which are all longer than its 4-inch body, according to Smithsonian Ocean, which further explains it uses these to collect particles and detritus falling through the water, often called marine snow, for food. These elastic extendable tentacles are also used for breathing. The creature also has nuchal organs, 2 feathery structures that detect chemicals in the water. National Geographic describes the squidworm as half worm, half squid, or actually all worm. The publication is correct, as the creature is from the same group that earthworms and leeches come from. This creature is a great example of what can be found in deep water exploration. You never know. Tripod fish. The tripod fish is one of the world's deepest living fish. It's named because it actually stands on a tripod. It inhabits temperate and tropical waters in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans at latitudes between 40 degrees north and 40 degrees south, and depths between 2,950 and 15,400 feet. Measuring up to 14 inches long, it's a relatively small species, but the tripod fish has modified pelvic and caudal fins called rays, which protrude from its underside and tail and extend up to 3.3 feet long, more than 3 times longer than its actual body. These long bony appendages, which float softly when the fish is swimming, fill with fluids to achieve their rigid state, helping the fish to stand. Researchers believe the tripod fish evolved to do this to position themselves advantageously for catching prey like prawns, crustaceans, and fish near the ocean floor. This does not help the species see better, as it lives in a super dark habitat where vision is useless and therefore is practically eyeless, but its fins can feel the vibrations of an approaching creature. Giant isopod. Giant isopods, of which there are 20 species, are large crustaceans belonging to the genus Bathynomus and are distantly related to shrimp and crabs, but they are really creepy. They dwell at depths of up to 7,000 feet in the cold waters of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Bathynomus giganteus is the largest known giant isopod species, although there are other, less studied species that may grow just as big. They live on carrion such as dead sharks or whales that float to the bottom of the sea. Giant isopods resemble massive versions of their distant, much smaller relative, the pillbug, also known as the common woodlouse. In other words, if you detest bugs, the Bathynomus genus is what your worst nightmares are made of. It's divided into giant species measuring between 3.1 and 5.9 inches long, and supergiants, who are between 6.7 and 19.7 inches long. B. giganteus, a supergiant, grows between 7.5 and 14.2 inches on average, with a maximum weight of almost 4 pounds. These creatures have an exoskeleton of fused segments forming a protective shell. To protect themselves from predators, they curl up into a ball, exposing only this outer shell and keeping their soft underside safe. Giant isopods are a pale pinkish or lilac color, but that's probably their only pleasant characteristic. These creepy crawlers have 7 pairs of legs, 2 pairs of antennae, and large, widely spaced, shiny compound eyes. They feed mostly on the remains of other creatures that fall to the sea floor. You'll probably never encounter one of these deep-dwelling scavengers in the wild, but some aquariums, including the Key West Aquarium, have them on display. Leafy sea dragon. The leafy sea dragon is found in the waters off South and East Australia. This creature is closely related to seahorses and pipefish, although it looks much fancier. It measures up to 35 centimeters long, is brown to yellow in body color, and is ornately camouflaged with leaf-shaped olive-hued appendages that help it blend in with seaweed and kelp. See? Can you see it? These leaf-like structures are not used for swimming. Instead, the leafy sea dragon propels itself through the water using its two nearly transparent pectoral and dorsal fins. Like its cousin the seahorse, males of this species bear the children, but instead of a pouch, they carry the female's bright pink eggs, which she deposits during mating on the underside of their tail. After incubating and carrying the eggs for 4 to 6 weeks, the male gives birth. As mesmerizing as leafy sea dragons are, they are best admired in their natural habitat. Their numbers shrank critically during the early 1990s due to divers taking them to keep as pets, and they don't do well in aquariums. While pollution and habitat loss continue to threaten the species, government protection against removing them from their environment has helped their population recover to the IUCN level of near threatened. The coelacanth. The coelacanth is a primitive deep-sea fish that, until 1938, scientists believed went extinct around 65 million years ago. After all, its most recent appearance in the fossil record was 80 million years ago. This is the perfect example of creatures we thought were extinct, but then came back to life. This large ancient bony fish, which lives at depths of up to 2,300 feet, can grow over 6.5 feet long and weigh as much as 198 pounds. Scientists estimate the coelacanth can live for an estimated 60 years or more. It has a rostral organ in its snout that's unique to the coelacanth and is part of its electrosensory system, which is used to detect prey. The fish also has an intracranial joint, or a hinge, which enables it to swing part of its cranium upward and widen its mouth. Most noticeable of the coelacanth's features are its paired limb-like fins, which move in an alternating pattern like legs, and its thick scales, which are typical only of extinct fish. Although there were around 90 species at one time, there are only 2 known extant species of coelacanths right now. Latmeria columnae, the species discovered in 1938, dwells in the western Indian Ocean, particularly near the Comoros Islands. Then, in 1997, scientists found another coelacanth species 6,000 miles east of the Comoros in northern Sulawesi, Indonesia. The 2 species are genetically distinct and significantly different from one another, leading experts to believe they have been separated for several millions of years or longer. Hey, but what's time to a fish? Christmas tree worm. Found among the world's coral reefs and named for its appearance, Spirobranchus Giganteus, or the Christmas tree worm, has a tube-like body with 2 brightly colored crowns protruding from it. This species is just 1.5 inches long, but it's easily spotted thanks to the array of its vibrant hues. Its crowns are covered in hair-like appendages called radioles, which are used for respiration and catching the microscopic plants called phytoplankton that it feeds on. This anatomy comes in handy for its sedentary lifestyle, which involves not moving much once it finds a comfortable place to burrow into the coral. When threatened, the creature withdraws its tree-like crowns and retreats fully into its burrow. Red-lipped batfish. The red-lipped batfish stands out because it looks like it's wearing lipstick. It's related to other batfish but unique to the Galapagos Islands. It dwells on the Pacific Ocean floor at depths between 10 and 250 feet and in sandy reefs at depths of up to 393 feet. This species, which reaches up to 8 inches in length, has numerous unique characteristics. For one, it looks like it's wearing bright red lipstick or has just eaten a bloody meal, as I'm sure you've gathered from its name. Secondly, the red-lipped batfish has fins that work like pseudo-legs, similarly to the tripod fish. It uses these appendages to walk along the sea bottom, surveying its environment in search of food, mainly small fish and crustaceans like mollusks and shrimp. The creature also has what's called an elysium, a structure on its head that scientists believe it uses to lure prey in. Despite the fish's advantage of being able to walk at the bottom of the ocean, the species has some drawbacks, namely that it's not a very strong swimmer. It's also not very attractive, despite its crimson-colored lips. Sea angel. You've probably never seen a pretty slug, but sea angels, a large group of extremely small marine slugs, are so pretty they look like angels. Who would have thought? These gelatinous creatures have flowy, translucent white bodies and wing-like appendages. Don't be fooled by the sea angel's innocent look. While they may be harmless to most creatures, they are predatory, feasting on small snails called sea butterflies. There are 6 different families of sea angels, the largest species of which measures just 2 inches. Arctic and subarctic Atlantic species are on the larger end of the spectrum, while warm-water, Pacific-dwelling sea angels are much smaller. They do not have shells, and the foot apparent in most other slugs has in their case turned into their wings. Sea angels are hermaphrodites, but a specimen cannot reproduce on its own. They are born male and possess both male and female reproductive organs as adults, but two are required to reproduce. In 2017, marine biologist Alexander Semenov captured footage of their entrancing and rarely seen side-by-side mating dance off the northern Russia coast. Deep red jellyfish. Nicknamed the deep red jellyfish, Crossota norvegica is a type of predatory, very small animal called a hydrozoan and lives in the Arctic Ocean at depths below 3,300 feet. Described as alien-like in appearance, it reaches just 0.79 inches or 2 centimeters in body size and is round with 275 small tentacles. Scientists know very little about this cryptic species, including whether two specimens are required for reproduction, or if, like some hydrozoa, the deep red jellyfish can reproduce on its own. It's closely related to the Crossota milsae, a deep-sea hydrozoan that is not hermaphroditic and which requires mating between two partners, a male and a female, to reproduce. Terrible claw lobster. In 2010, a trio of scientists, including Census of Marine Life co-founder Jesse Ausubel, discovered a new species of lobster. Nicknamed Dinochelus Ausubeli in honor of the Rockefeller University scholar who participated in its discovery and nicknamed the terrible claw, or mighty claw lobster, this deep water dweller was first witnessed in the waters off the Philippines, about 820 feet below the water's surface. The completely blind, pink and purple creature is just 1.2 inches long. In most ways, it looks like any other lobster, but it has one large conspicuous body part that stands out. Can you guess what it is? Its most striking feature is a mighty claw with a short, bulbous palm and extremely long, spiny fingers for capturing prey, according to Science Daily. No one has ever seen a lobster with such divergent claws, Census of Marine Life senior scientist Ron Odor told NPR. Normally, lobsters that we eat have one big claw and one little one. However, two of the mighty claw's relatives, both of which live in the waters off Australia, have a similar, toothy, elongated claw, according to Australian Geographic. All three of these species are very rare, and very few specimens of each have ever been found. Researchers are still trying to figure out exactly what their strange claw is used for. Thanks for watching! Which creature was your favorite? Did any of them creep you out? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and click that bell if you're new here, and I'll see you soon. Bye!